Happy Tuesday, dudes. Today you guys are hopefully finishing up that mind map activity, and then with the instructions for how to save that again are going to be on that assignment. So if you go to the assignment, find that little document, it says it at the bottom for exactly how to do that. After you have turned that in, we've refined it down to just the 5 to 8 pieces of information. Half of those pieces of information need to make sure that they are statistic based. And then we have a clear graph or visual to go along with them as well. You should be good. The next thing that we need to talk about today is going to be like some of the essentials. Just kind of want to review what we're doing here. So that flow and personality slideshow, when you click on that, remember this is going to bring you through lots of different examples. We've got some good, we've got some bad in here. And so to help us understand like what's good and what's bad, it would be probably useful for us to start with that rubric. So if we click on that first, this is how you will be assessed on your final project. You'll notice that again, I need 5 to 8 pieces of information. And then with that as well, all of them are going to need to be visually represented rather than just like listed on the page. So every piece of information has to have a visual. And then with those visuals, we are, with the infograph poster in all together, this is how it'll be assessed. So your requirement is to have a headline, subheadline, 5 to 8 pieces of information, one outside element. So that means something that you're looking on to either draw or some sort of photo that you've taken from either a free website that I have listed on Canvas or have taken yourself. And then last thing, at least one graph. Hopefully you guys will have more than one graph or like some diagrams in there as well. So if we look at our flow and personality, we can see like let's go to like this one over here. So we've got like social media. That's the overall heading of the thing. And then if we look at the individual pieces of information, there's lots of little subheadings that go for each of the information. So when we're looking at that rubric where it says heading, that's overall. Subheading is for each piece of information. Now, it's optional, I would say, for like the subheading to be for each information. The other option for this would be like something overarching. So this one is a better example of something overarching. We have our heading, and then right below it, it says archery at the Olympics. So that's the subheading that goes with the main heading. But then the individual pieces of information do not have their own main headings primarily, or subheadings primarily. So as long as you have one or the other when it comes to those subheadings, you're good. And we got to keep it consistent as well. Okay, next thing in there, so we're looking for the appropriate font pairings, hierarchy, legibility. So when we talk about that hierarchy and legibility, one of the biggest things that I like to make sure that you guys are keeping in mind is the overall size of the thing. So looking at the sunscreen one, I love the design of this one. It looks so good, so nice and clean. But one of the problems of it is these words are so tiny. And so the font that they chose, with it being so light, when it's not bolded, even though it's a good size, it's hard to read. So like that would be an example of like legibility with the font choice being an issue. Another thing that can be really helpful when we're thinking about hierarchy is making sure that we do incorporate that in to some of our little blurbs about them. The less words you can have, the easier this is. Just like when we were doing our bookmark assignment, where you guys had a limit of around 10 words, because the less words you have, the easier it is for you to find a place for hierarchy. You'll also notice in this one about T that we've got lots of areas where the most important information is made in green. So that's another consistent thing that is shown in some of our better ones, is taking the most important words, and if they're not bigger, they're at least a different color. If they're not bigger, they're at least a different color. Okay. Composition and flow. So this is the overall arrangement on the page. We're asking you to do quite a lot with this project, with it being your final project. So you're taking all of the information and trying to make it feel like it's going from one thing to the other in a seamless way. So looking at some of these before, I've explained that like putting things in boxes can be a little bit of a like a static sort of feel for it. So you'll notice that in the way that it's graded, it says space feels full but not cluttered, and there's a clear visual connection between parts. Ooh, typo. Connections between parts. Then, as we continue to the next part, it says composition is relatively successful but stagnant. So the difference between these two things here is just about the amount of movement you're able to create with your pieces of information. So if there's not a lot of movement, then this one is what you'll end up getting. If there is a good amount of movement, but it feels full, this one is what you'll get. Now, there can be situations where things can get cluttered, or they can also have like random little gaps. So when we're thinking about that, so I would say like these, right? Like these have some really nice flow to them. There's like this one, it like literally points us down. This points us down. So it's continuously leading us from one to another for the pieces of information. When we look at like this one, it does point to something overall. Each of it's got visuals though, and it kind of leads you seamlessly across the page. This is another good one, looking at like the way that the sports teams are arranged, leading us across the page. Good layering with those there. But the gapping definitely can happen. So like right here, if we didn't have this boat right here, that would feel like a pretty open and empty area. So just by putting this little boat here, that helped with that setup. Having backgrounds like this one can be super fun, but it's also really hard to pull off. So this is an area where it looks cluttered, right? So we identified this one as one that looks cluttered. It has a background, but it's difficult to pull off as like nice and smooth because they chose that background. There's just not really good spots to put things. So instead they feel kind of randomly placed throughout the page. That would score something like this. And then if it's even worse than that, then it would move down to the next one. Okay. Color scheme. So hopefully you guys are super familiar with this one by now. We've been doing this for a couple different projects. And so it needs to be clear and identifiable. It needs to unify the composition. So we're using it in multiple areas, not just the heading is one color and everything else is a different color. And then last one is your use of program. So overall craftsmanship, you guys have gotten grades on craftsmanship for all of the projects that you've done. So hopefully whichever skills you're working through, then you understand what good craftsmanship is in that area. I do want to see some skill development, and the biggest thing for that is understanding how to problem solve. So of course I'll be there to answer questions here and there, but ideally it'd be working efficiently and independently. You guys have all of the tools you need to know in order to do these projects. Okay, and then it continues down with like, you know, craftsmanship issues, as well as possibly relies on others to make their decisions, struggles to work independently for that. Okay. Then the last thing that I want to go over in this video is the style analysis. So with that style analysis, this is a Canvas assignment similar to the other one. There are step-by-step instructions that go through it. So the idea would be that you're looking for like what would be good examples of infograph posters and what would be bad examples of infograph posters. It does have like the list of slides that you will need, but then I also have the template listed for you in Canvas. So if you just make a copy of this, it gives you a spot for these pieces of criteria. Now these criteria can be things that are already on the rubric, or they can be things that you come up with on your own. So for example, like something that you find really important, maybe a specific style choice. Maybe it's about the amount of information or something like that. And then you describe what that means to you. From there, you copy this list and then paste it in this spot so that you can go through and grade. You can grade however you want, ABC, 1 through 5, thumbs up, thumbs down, and then just make sure you tell me in general why you feel the way you do about it. For finding the actual infographics, that's gonna be as simple as Googling and figuring out as you're looking through what you like, what you don't like. There's certainly a plethora of both options just on Google. It does flip over to the bad version, so things you do not like after that. And so that would be moving on from there. If you have any extra time after completing that style analysis, the last thing of the day would be to start drawing for your project, whether that be additional graphics or whether that be the overall layout. Any time that you can have to kind of start drawing things out is going to help you. I'll see you guys tomorrow, and then our goal for tomorrow is have the skeleton created. So we'll set up the canvas and we'll start working digitally on everything tomorrow. Thank you. I hope you have a great day.